She's not even top 15. So why is she outselling the world number 1? A 21-year-old ranked outside the top 15 just forced a Grand Slam-level tournament to rip up its seating chart, rewrite its menu, and rethink everything it thought it knew about ticket demand. She isn't the favorite to win the title. She isn't even the highest-ranked woman in the draw. And yet, in city after city, her matches are the only ones anyone is asking about. Stay with me, because by the end of this video you'll understand exactly why organizers are calling it a phenomenon they've never had to plan around before, and why one chairman admitted his own staff didn't want to tell him just how big the number really was. The hook they didn't see coming. Here's the part that should stop you mid-scroll. This isn't hype dressed up as a headline. It's math. It's a chairman standing in front of cameras, visibly startled by his own ticketing data. It's a 12,000-seat stadium selling out in under an hour. It's a menu that had never changed in the history of a tournament, changing twice in 1 week. Somewhere between Washington, Toronto, and Cincinnati, something happened that nobody in professional tennis had modeled for. And the woman at the center of it says the whole thing still feels like it belongs to someone else. Before we get into just how deep this goes, if you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. We cover the biggest emotional stories in tennis every single week, and trust me, you don't want to miss where this one ends up. A name the tour wasn't ready for. Her name is Alexandra Eala. Filipino fans call her Alex. And if you'd asked most casual tennis fans who she was even 18 months ago, you'd likely have gotten a shrug. She wasn't a junior phenom splashed across magazine covers from age 12. She wasn't the product of a marketing plan. She was a wild-card entry from Quezon City, trained partly at the Rafael Nadal Academy, grinding through qualifying draws while the sport's biggest names filled the highlight reels. Then, in the space of a single season, everything changed. She climbed from outside the world's top 140 into the top 20. She became the first Filipina ever seeded at a Grand Slam. She beat Grand Slam champions along the way. Not once, not as a fluke, but repeatedly, methodically, as if she belonged there all along. And somewhere in that climb, something started happening in the stands that had nothing to do with rankings at all. Washington, where the numbers first broke. Let's start in the US Capitol, because this is where tournament organizers first realized they were dealing with something they didn't have a playbook for. At the Wimbledon DC Open, tournament chairman Mark Ine stood in front of reporters and said something that made the room go quiet. He revealed that, in the weeks leading up to the tournament, at least 80% of every ticketing inquiry his staff received was about one single question. When is Alex Eala playing? And then he went further. He suggested even that number was too conservative, that his own ticketing team had likely rounded down because the real figure felt almost unbelievable to say out loud. Think about what that actually means. This was a field that included Jessica Pegula, Naomi Osaka, Venus Williams, Madison Keys, and the defending champion. Some of the most recognizable names in the sport were on that draw sheet. And still, 4 out of every 5 people picking up the phone weren't asking about any of them. They were asking about her. Eala didn't just show up and soak in the attention either. She backed it up. She fought back from a set down against the tournament's top seed in a final delayed by rain across 2 separate days, eventually winning the deciding set without dropping a single game. It was her first WTA Tour title. It rocketed her to a career-high ranking, and it confirmed, in the most public way possible, that the crowds weren't showing up on a rumor. They were showing up for a champion in the making. Toronto, when a stadium sold out before most people finished their coffee. If Washington was the warning sign, Toronto was the moment the entire tennis world had to sit up and pay attention. At the National Bank Open, Eala's matches were slotted into the 12,000-seat Sobeys Stadium. According to tournament reporting, tickets for her session sold out within the hour of being released. Her official tournament debut drew a crowd north of 10,000. Filipino flags weren't just present in the stands. They dominated entire sections, turning a Canadian sporting venue into what felt, for 1 week, like a second home. And then came the detail that genuinely startled longtime tennis insiders. The food. For the first time in the tournament's history, organizers added a completely new dish to the official concession menu mid-event: chicken adobo, one of the most recognizable comfort foods in Filipino cuisine, served over rice. It sold out fast enough that within days, the tournament's executive chef added a second item: deep-fried pork lumpia, dressed with island spice vinegar, crushed peanuts, and a drizzle of banana ketchup. Tournament staff described the response as legendary. A senior Tennis Canada ticketing director admitted he'd started imagining how big Eala's Toronto debut could be months earlier, after watching thousands of fans get turned away from an undersized court during the Australian Open. The tournament director didn't hold back either, calling her presence an absolute blessing for the event. And Eala herself, after her opening win, turned to that packed stadium and greeted them in Tagalog. A small gesture that, judging by the reaction, meant everything to the people who'd shown up. She later posted a message to her fans that captured the whole week in a single phrase, telling them, in Tagalog, that she truly enjoyed her time in what she affectionately called Barangay Toronto, a nod to the size and warmth of the Filipino community that had adopted her for those 2 weeks. The skeptics and the player who shut them down. Not everyone was thrilled. As the crowds grew louder and larger, so did a small but vocal wave of criticism. Some fans online complaining that Eala's supporters, many of them new to tennis, weren't always following the sport's quieter etiquette. Applause in the wrong moments, chants during play, the kind of thing that ruffles feathers among tennis purists. That's when a name you'll definitely recognize stepped in to shut the conversation down. Former world number 1 and Grand Slam champion Andy Roddick, speaking on his own tennis podcast, said he wasn't interested in hearing any of it. He pointed to something remarkable happening back in the Philippines during Eala's Wimbledon run. Entire arenas, some holding thousands of people, filling up just to watch a fourth-round match on a big screen, together as a community. Roddick called it a movement, not a moment, and made clear he was fully on board with what people were now calling Eala Mania. He wasn't the only elite player to weigh in either. After beating Eala in straight sets at a WTA 1000 event in Dubai, world number 4 Coco Gauff took a moment to publicly thank her for what she called bringing a new demographic into the sport. Gauff admitted the pro-Eala crowd noise actually helped her focus. She joked that she started pretending the cheers were for her, just to stay in the right headspace. It's rare for a player to publicly credit an opponent's fanbase mid-tournament. It's rarer still for that opponent to have just lost the match in question. Wimbledon, the turning point. To understand why any of this built the way it did, you have to go back to Wimbledon, because that's where the phenomenon truly ignited on a global scale. Eala became the first player from the Philippines ever seeded at a Grand Slam tournament. And on center court, in the third round, she did something almost nobody outside her circle expected. She defeated the defending Wimbledon champion in straight sets, saving herself in a tense first-set tiebreak before pulling away. She advanced all the way to the fourth round, her best Grand Slam result to date, before finally falling in a grueling 3-set battle. Back home, the celebrations weren't quiet. Public watch parties filled arenas that seat over 10,000 people, all to watch a fourth-round match play out on a screen thousands of miles from London. She was welcomed home like a national hero, meeting with members of government who praised not just her success, but the humility with which she carried it. And when reporters asked her to explain the moment, Eala gave an answer that told you everything about why this connection with fans runs so deep. She described her rise as something built entirely on unseen hours. Not luck, not a single viral moment, but a routine most people never see. She talked about being at the courts from early morning until night, about the discipline that keeps her grounded, and about how the responsibility and inspiration she now carries are simply the natural result of that daily grind. It wasn't a soundbite crafted for a highlight reel. It was, by every account from those who covered it, exactly how she talks when the cameras are rolling and when they're not. Cincinnati, the highest seeding of her career, which brings us to right now, the Cincinnati Open, and the moment Eala's name appeared on the players' list as the 17th seed. It's the highest seeding she's ever received at a WTA 1000 event, and it comes attached to a career-high world ranking of 20. That seeding earned her something that would have been unthinkable to the wildcard version of herself from a year and a half ago. A first-round bye. No qualifiers to fight through. No early scourges through the bottom of the draw. Just extra time to recover from what had already been an exhausting stretch. 8 matches across 2 countries in the space of about 2 weeks, following her Washington title straight into a grueling Toronto run that ended in the 4th round against Belinda Bencic. The field around her in Cincinnati reads like a who's who of the sport. World number 1 Aryna Sabalenka headlines it, followed by Elena Rybakina, Jessica Pegula, Coco Gauff, and Mira Andreeva rounding out the top seeds. Defending champion Iga Swiatek lurks further down the list. It's a stacked, unforgiving draw, and Eala is walking into it not as a surprise underdog anymore, but as a seeded, recognized threat that every player in the bracket has to account for. She's been open about what the stretch has cost her physically, admitting she's had to prioritize staying healthy above almost everything else during the swing. But she's also been clear that she's carrying real lessons out of Toronto and into Cincinnati, and eventually, into the US Open, the final Grand Slam of her season, where the story of this entire year will reach its next chapter. More than a player, a diaspora finding a home court. Here's the part that turns this from a sports story into something much bigger. Wherever Eala plays, something happens that goes beyond tennis. Filipino communities, families, overseas workers, students living far from home, don't just tune in. They show up, sometimes traveling significant distances, to turn unfamiliar stadiums into something that feels, for a few hours, like a homecoming. It happened in Washington. It happened in Toronto. It happened even earlier in Dubai, where crowds packed courts so completely that other players on the tour started noticing the noise from well outside the stadium itself. That's not an exaggeration either, it's become something of a running theme on tour. Players competing on nearby courts have described being able to hear the roar from Eala's matches echoing across the grounds, a level of atmosphere usually reserved for the very top of the sport, not a player still climbing into the world's top 20. Eala herself seems acutely aware of the weight behind all of it, and consistently uncomfortable taking full credit for it. She's described her rise as deeply personal, something built by her team and her family as much as by her, and she's spoken about feeling like just one small part of something much larger than herself. A nation's pride, expressed one match at a time. What happens next? So here's where we're left. A player outside the traditional elite of her sport has become one of its single biggest attractions. Measurable in sold-out stadiums, in menus rewritten overnight, in a tournament chairman visibly stunned by his own data. Tournament directors are no longer treating her as a nice storyline. They're treating her as a variable that reshapes how they plan an entire event, from court assignments to catering. And the question hanging over Cincinnati and over the US Open right behind it is simple: how far does this go? Does the 17th seed keep climbing the draw the way she's been climbing the rankings all year? Does Eala Mania find its biggest stage yet in New York? On the sport's largest court, in front of the largest crowd the story has ever had access to? Nobody knows yet. But if the last 12 months are any indication, betting against her, on the court or in the stands, has not been a winning strategy for anyone. If this story moved you even a little, that's exactly why we do this every week. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stick around, because the next chapter of the story is about to be written in New York, and you will not want to find out what happens from someone else's headline. We'll see you in the next one.